the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Women in AV. Joining me today, I have Jennifer Goodyear, my trusty co-host. How are you doing today, Jennifer?
Good. How are you, Erica?
I am awesome. Thank you. And joining us today, we have some lovely guests. We'll start with Jenn. I'll let you introduce yourself, Jenn and Carrie. Go ahead, Jenn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jenn Steinhardt. I am a consultant with SMW. And you may also know me from the Twitterverse as Nerdy Curl AV.
Awesome. How about you, Carrie? Can you give us a little introduction?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Garcia. You guys might know my hashtag, Get Carried Away. I'm on Twitter as AV Chick, and I work for YCD Multimedia, and I head up their sales for the US.
Awesome. Thanks. So today we have a pretty interesting conversation planned. Our topic today is going to be centered more about mental health and wellness and what that means, you know, with home, with the workplace, and mixing the two together. I'm going to kick it off to Jenn to sort of start the conversation, since you were spearheading all of the research and everything behind this particular episode.
Sure. So first of all, I wanted to bring Jenn and Carrie on because Carrie was my co-leader for the Vixen Women's Council down in South Florida. And she was just always she always has anyone that knows Carrie, she's always got a positive, happy attitude. She always shows up for you when you need her. She's just really easy to talk to. I think she's one of the most amiable people in all of AV, really. And you, of course, Carrie, tell me what you want me sharing or not sharing about your personal life, but you would never know that sometimes she's been going through things in her personal life with her health, and she never brings that to anyone else's desk. She never puts that on anyone else. You wouldn't know it's there. So you've got to have some pretty good mental health coping skills, I think, in order to do that. So that's why I had Carrie on. And as far as Jenn goes, she is just kind of synonymous with mental health within our industry. We both got 40 under 40 this year with Commercial Integrator. And she was known for her help with mental health within our industry. And I think that is huge because I didn't ever hear of it before Jenn brought it up, honestly. So I really wanted to find out how you even get the confidence to do that. And I wanted to thank her as well for doing that. So I want to get the topic started with Jenn. How did you bring mental health up into our industry? How did you make it a thing? Were you scared? What can you tell us about it?
I was scared out of my mind, no doubt, but it was also what brought me to just jump and start talking about it. So kind of bringing that back a little bit. When I was younger, I mean, I've been dealing with depression and anxiety since I can remember, particularly even since my teenage years. So it's something that I've been really trying to understand and practice different strategies to manage it. But a lot of it was managing on my own. And when I got kind of into the workplace and the more active in kind of high school, where you're having more conversations about these kinds of issues with a safer space that may be like a school rather than at home or in certain friend groups. And the feedback was just in that time very much that if you talk about these things, you're either going to be perceived as weak, that you're not capable of doing the job, and that you're not going to get hired. And I got to a point where I felt that, particularly around topics of neurodiversity, where this is just an insane process. There's no way this is the way the world can work. There's just no way. And, you know, I guess short story long, is that I decided I know that there's others like me who are going through a very human process, whether it's, a mental health condition like depression, or it's you're going through a really difficult life change like loss of a loved one. Not one is greater or less. They're just different and absolutely valid. And there's strengths that come along with some of these conditions too. And it's time that we talk about it. And as scary as it is, because there is still stigma, this is actually a really exciting time to be an adult, and have a difference, invisible diversity or disability, depending on your environment, because we're able to talk about this more now. Is it perfect? No, but that's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that we're finally talking about it. It's an exciting time to be an adult. I was actually just visiting friends in Orlando that work in a completely different industry, and we were talking about how we feel bad for generations that are even just a decade or 2 decades above us, because at least we are allowed to talk about it. I don't think 10, 20 years ago it was appropriate. And Carrie, you have 2 boys. And so they're of the generation that's coming into the work. Well, they've been in the workforce, but they're younger than everyone on this call, and
Yes.
they are coming into a workforce. And do you ever see that they are able to talk about, hey, I need mental health day, or is that more of an open thing for their generation?
It is quite a bit of more of an open than it was even in my day. I mean, I come from a Hispanic background, and nobody ever got therapy, right? You'd pick up the phone and you'd call an aunt and you'd complain or cry, and they would tell you, butch up, deal with it. This is life, or you're a woman. And like, what kind of advice is that, right? For a young, impressionable girl. So that is what I experienced when I was young. And so now I admire and I appreciate folks like Jenn and her advocacy within our industry for women, of women. And it's like my kids openly speak about um, them having 5 mental health days a year, right? In addition to their vacation or their PTO, and no reasoning necessary. My eldest is an attorney, and wow, does he have a major workload? So I see the mental health days necessary for him. But even our college students are getting mental health days, because my youngest graduates on Saturday, and he had about 5 this year. So my 24-year-old and my 25-year-old have it so much easier. Um, no offense, because they're men, number one. And then number two, because they've grown up and it's a lot more acceptable to speak about now than even when I was growing up. I'm 20 years older than each of them, right? And it's just, it was a big stigma. You didn't speak about it. Everything was hush hush.
So I'd like to hop in here for a second. I come from a similar Hispanic background, and my biggest advice that I got from my family was, you'll figure it out. And that's not advice at all. But I mean, all of the women before me in my family, they have all figured it out. And so that's, you're finding your way, and you'll figure it out. And that's not really an answer, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit. I know that I work for a company that is a little bit more open-minded, and I think that more companies are leaning towards this, where we have sort of health and wellness built into our culture, where we have like days for yoga or mindfulness Mondays, where they schedule a meditation once a month, just to give people time to purposefully put time on their calendar to not have to work during those hours and actually go through, some personal healing when it comes to balancing your workload and stuff like that. Have you heard of other companies doing that, or what other things companies are offering to their employees to proactively help them with their mental health?
I want to go back and mention something that I thought was super interesting that you both brought up, was a matter of intersectionality. that goes into how we each experience mental health as well, which is a very challenging topic when you're talking about mental health in the workplace, but it's unavoidable when we're talking about mental health, is that there are, an intersectionality is kind of referring to, you mentioned your Hispanic background, mentioned being a woman, and then mentioning your sons of being male. And so how each of these different levels of what kind of social structures and expectations around each kind of identity affects us, and how we're taught to deal with it and how we're taught to handle it, and breaking that cycle is super difficult. So I thought it was so interesting because of what we all experienced as females, but what you each experience as Hispanic females. I thought that was really interesting. But kind of going back though to what seeing in the workplace, particularly wellness rooms and having a place to go and take a break, having resources and things like that, whether it's a how-to guide or a here's where you can go if you need to talk to someone, here's where you can go if you need support for, say, something around your identity. Maybe it's an LGBTQ issue, maybe it's around race or gender. But having those kind of resources are some big things that I've been seeing as well.
Where I'm at currently at YCD, I'm encouraged to go ahead and be an adult and make those decisions and those findings on my own. There are resources that are offered to me through our, medical providers. And in addition to, I work with a phenomenal team who checks their ego at the door and encourages everybody to contribute or not contribute, and you choose how you want to go ahead and perform your duties. And I think that empowerment in and of itself and that encouragement trumps any culture that's talked about in the workplace, but actionable culture is when you allow your individual contributors to be adults and ask for that assistance or find it and help them find it, right? So being a power for good and not to ignore or, sweep things under the rug.
So what kind of resources can other companies offer to their employees as an avenue to reach out for help?
Do we know if anyone in our company-wise in our industry is doing anything similar to what like hospitals are doing? I had said in there that I brought this subject up to my husband, and they're 70% female. So we're in completely different, I'm in a male dominated, he's in a female dominated industry. And things are a lot easier for him over there. He says all the women are so warm, so he's having a great time. But one of the things is mental health is taken very seriously in his industry because they are in the healthcare industry. And so they see this is a health issue. It's just as important as any other part of your health. So they actually offer you free therapy. You get 6 free days. You have a phone number. You can call up, make an appointment anytime. And then I think it's $20 every session after that. So you basically have free mental health care at all times, basically, or very, very cheap. Do we have anything like that in our industry? Jen, have you seen that at all?
So I have not, and I was actually really surprised when I saw you when you'd sent that out, because I've been seeing in the industry things like flexible vacation time or flexible schedules or sorry, unlimited PTO, I think is the phrase that that's been going around, which is it serves a very similar purpose in that you're giving people time to essentially, like Carrie saying, manage your schedule to how you need to. And it's a business case as well. I mean, it sounds dirty to say it like that, but it's what's good for business is also good for your people, that if they're being run into the ground or if they're going through something, whether it's, chemical or life circumstance, taking one day is going to really help for the long term. So I've also seen informal programs like, hey, you've been covering a lot, and let's, how about you take a PTO day? Don't worry, it's not going to count towards. So I've seen some things like that in certain places as well.
Yeah, I've seen after like a big project, hey, why don't you take a long weekend, right? Take the Friday or long weekend, or take Monday off. Coming from finance before AV, they actually had what you're talking about, Jen, going ahead and doing like 5 visits of therapy, considered like an ERP program, and then a $25 extension for the therapy afterwards, especially for new moms. A lactation room being set up, because when you have to go back, and if you're still nursing, you're able to go ahead and express, keep it in a fridge. I mean, back in the day, 50 something. And I went ahead and they bought me like a little fridge to my desk. I didn't have a room that I could go into, but I went into the ladies' room. I pumped there, stuck it in my fridge. My husband at lunchtime would come pick it up, take it back to my mother-in-law and my mom, who were babysitting for me at the time. I just think that we as an industry are encouraging our women so much more now, that women are speaking up and saying, hey, that's my seat, move over, right? Because we're sitting at the table now. And I think that, like in any industry, we just have to command respect for ourselves, right? For others to in turn respect us. And sometimes that has been hard for me, case in point, because a woman in this industry, I didn't know much. I knew IT, but I didn't know AV. And then I had those allies, those men that were willing to go ahead and help me learn, because I proved myself. I sat in the permitting offices. I went on ride-alongs. I tried to get to know the guys at AT&T. I was climbing poles, right? So they knew I wasn't afraid to do the work, and I wasn't just coming in to try to be like, a booth babe, that kind of thing. But I got more and more, I guess, street cred in the industry, because I was willing to learn. I'm willing to go ahead and put myself out there, be vulnerable, but also, command respect. I love giving back to the community, because I know, little girls are impressionable, right? The work that Erica and Jenn are doing with, Rosie's Riveters is so important. I had so many inspirational people contribute into my lives. I was a pastor's kid, and I was very, very sheltered. At the same time, I grew up around a lot of love. So I went ahead, and my mom is a cancer survivor, which actually helped me through my cancer journey, right? So 3-time cancer survivor. And how do I do that? I had a lot of people encouraging me in my corner, and I had almost like guilt that I survived and had to deal with that. That's like, that takes a toll on your mental health, in addition to imposter syndrome. After I did survive and I'm overcoming that guilt, like, can I do this? How do I progress in my career? What am I doing next to help myself? And I'm sitting for my CTS this year at Infocom. So
Yay!
Fingers crossed, ladies.
That's very exciting.
That's awesome.
And you've always, when you were going through, I never knew you were going through anything health-wise to begin with. And you were always asking me, how can I help you? Because I think when we met, I was only 23 or 24. Yeah. I was really young. And I was intimidated by this industry and trying to get involved. And you were always asking me how you could help me and all that. And it's crazy that I didn't learn till later on that this wasn't even like your first time around with cancer. And it's crazy. And you never put that on. You were just always a smiling face. And so I always thought, wow, she's taking care of her mental health, because you can't treat people the way you treat people unless you're taking care. Because that's all another subject I wanted to bring up. We're not doing our mental health stuff. You're really not doing it for you. Like for me, when I get into a depressive state or I have anxiety, I'm kind of fine with it. Like I'm used to being around myself. So I'm okay with me that way. But I do have to recognize that no one else around me is having a good time if I'm that way. So you really have to take care of your mental health for the people around you that you love.
It's the two boys that you do it for. In my case, when I would get into a funk, I would just, have to stay positive and think about them. And want to make sure that I created a safe space and a comfortable space for them, not to the detriment of myself. I knew I'd be able to go ahead and like roll with the punches. I've got grit. I can sink my heels in and get myself out of it. But for them, right? And my husband, he's so funny. He's like, I always introduce him as my better half, and he always introduces me as his 3/4 better. And it's not lip service. It really does lift your spirits. It encourages you, and it empowers you to go on to the next thing, right? We've been married November, it'll be like 32 years. And he's like my biggest cheerleader. And so we have a very tight family unit, and I do it for them as much as for myself. And I'm a big giver. I just believe in always paying back. My mom, thank God, she's still with me, and she's a cancer survivor. And here I am, 3-time cancer survivor. What do I have to complain about? Like, what could possibly? And I do get into funks. I'm not like perfect, but at the same time, I have so much to be grateful for. The gratitude is where my attitude comes from. I'm blessed. And so I just want to give that back. I want to reach back and give it to those that are coming up, and I want to pay it forward, because I've been so blessed in my life.
I love that so much. There's so much to take away from that. Having cheerleaders in your life, sharing the gratitude, pay it forward. All of that is so important to this entire conversation. And I'm curious. I didn't know all of this about you and your history. How did you keep it together at work? I mean, the balance between, it's more than just like life and work. You had life and health and work and kids and family and
when you work hard and people see your work ethic, they're more they show more empathy with you. At my last job, this amazing CRO, I went ahead and I called him and I said, listen, I already went ahead and put in for a week vacation, but we were coming up to, the end of the year, end of the quarter, December 2nd. And I'm like, what I'm thinking about doing is having surgery on a Wednesday, taking Thursday, Friday off, Saturday and Sunday. That kind of makes a week for me. I'll be back to work on Monday. And he's like, are you kidding me? 3 days, 3 months, 3 weeks. This will be here when you get back. We are supporting you. And it was just like the best feeling to have a leader be that empathetic to your situation, and just know, because of your work ethic, because you have always put your best foot forward and done the best you could for the organization, that the organization is actually on your side and empowering you and allowing you to heal and to take care of what you need to do health-wise, and knowing that the business will take care of itself.
Yeah, Jenn, when you were bringing all of the mental health stuff up in a public light in AV, were you hearing from any leadership? Like Carrie was saying, it's really important for the leadership to understand the importance of mental health and giving you a break. Were you hearing from any leadership at all, or was it basically just people coming to you saying, I'm going through the same thing? Like, what was the feedback there?
It's been mixed. I've gotten a lot of comments and from people in leadership positions, and I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's more of we need to be talking about it more, and I think that looking at the models of support that we see in home, like a supportive husband and family or partner. I mean, I'm using Carrie's example. Whatever your family structure looks like is perfect. But essentially, your manager, middle management and upper management both needs this training. And what does mental health first aid look like? How do you respond? What are some empathetic ways of managing a schedule, like you guys were just talking about? We need way more training in that aspect. Compared to openness is great, and awareness and education is a very important first step, but we need to be talking about it much, much more in leadership.
Can we break that down to even a more micro level, something that is an easy thing for managers to do or to lead by example? Do you have any advice for that? Just like a quick takeaway. The first thing that comes to mind, let me tell you where I'm headed with this. What comes to mind with me is, in my experience in working in general, I have had managers that will email me at 10 o'clock at night or at 6 a.m. on Saturday. And I think people aren't using the tools that they could be using, like scheduling an email, because they should be leading by example. Right.
And also taking care of their own mental health and not sending emails at 10 at night as well.
Exactly. So is there anything else that's just like a small tip? Like, what can we do today to help promote a positive, mental health outlook today? What can we do?
I mean, I think at its base level, I've really enjoyed leaders like Brene Brown and Simon Sinek. I think that they're excellent models to look at in this aspect. But I believe that it was Simon Sinek that he was giving a speech talking about his infinite mindset and the infinite game, and he kind of talks about being vulnerable as a leader is not to show up, cry, and go, I'm vulnerable. But yeah, sometimes you kind of got to cry and, step aside, regroup. All right. So let's do this, but be vulnerable, know that it's human and it's not, be kind, be strong. Remember, you're not alone. That's the way I've been bad about keeping up with my YouTube videos, but that's always the way I like to close them off. And I think that no matter where you are in a power structure, whether it's formal power or informal power, you need to be leading with a, how can I help you? What do I need? What roadblocks are you facing right now? I've noticed that you've been late, a few times in a row. What's going on? And it's, be open when they respond to that, because it's a lot of times what makes a environment safe is a micro conversation, something that you said in passing to someone else, that's where that culture builds and comes from. And so being more intentional about those things and just being a little bit more human.
Yep. Yeah, that human factor actually comes into place, and it matters more than anybody knows. I mean, think about bereavement policies, right? Where you go ahead and you get a standard 3-day if it's local, 5-day if it's, someplace you have to travel to, and it has to be immediate family. Well, sometimes your husband's family or extended family is even closer than your own personal family, right? So a 3-day bereavement may not be enough. But just a simple, how are you doing? Have you thought about grievance counseling or, do you need assistance? I mean, I don't even care if it's a basket or a plant, right? Something that just shows your humanity and that you care, because people don't care what you say. They care how you make them feel. And, leaders are responsible for their team.
That's a great point. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. That's brings us to about half an hour.
It's crazy. And we barely even touched on mental health. It really is. It's something that we just have to keep talking about in this industry, because 30 minutes, it just went by trying to get through it. And I think that it really is that whole old saying of everyone's going through a struggle you have no idea about. And I think everyone's kind of said that in their own way on this call. If someone, like Jen was saying, if someone's being late, is it possible that they have something going on and it's not just because they're lazy? And if a manager is acting out, is it possible that they've got something going on and they're under a lot of pressure and they don't have the tools they need? So I think we all just need to keep looking out for each other. And I mean, doing what Carrie did, just you can go through things and still be a kind, warm person to the people around you.
Thank you.
Yeah. 1000%. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Carrie, for joining us today and for helping us explore this topic. I hope that we can come back to it. I know that there's so much more avenues to unpack. Absolutely.
To be continued.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining our Women in AV podcast.
Where can we find you, Jen and Carrie?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. My as I mentioned earlier, Nerdy Girl AV, and always happy to connect. And anything, whether it's AV, mental health, neurodiversity, I'm always open to chat. So please, happy to connect.
Thank you for being that resource for people. That's pretty amazing. And you, Carrie?
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, and on Twitter as AV Chick, or at cgarcia@ycdmultimedia.com.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us today, and have a great rest of your mental health week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.